Coming up next, we're chatting with Scott Case, the CEO of Recurrent, a company that is doing some amazing stuff with data collected from electric vehicles. And seriously, it is some really cool stuff. And we're going to talk all about whether used EVs are a good buy or not. There's a new way of measuring charging speed that you might want to know about. And of course, we'll also talk about EPA range estimates that keep getting worse, but not in the way you might expect. So stick around for all that and a lot more right here on GreenCars, the podcast. So if you're interested in sustainable transportation, you are in the right place because that is exactly what we cover right here on GreenCars, the podcast. I am automotive journalist Craig Cole, and if you've listened to this show before, you know what I'm going to say next because I am joined by my co-host, who's also the Vice President of Market Research at Telemetry, Sam Abuelsamid.
Hello, Craig. How are you today?
I'm not too bad. We've got some video shooting to do for a vehicle review that's it's for a Land Cruiser, and it has been fighting us every step of the way, specifically the weather. We've been rained out for 2 days, and we just haven't been able to finish the job. But today, after this recording, fingers crossed we're going to finish it.
Yeah, it's been kind of a wet week here.
Yeah, a little bit soggy. But what's news with you? What have you been driving these days?
Well, I just got out of the Polestar 4.
Nice.
Which is a car I have very mixed feelings about. I really like the way it looks. I really like the way it drives. And so many other things about it just annoy me to no end.
Uh-huh. What annoys you?
On this one, yeah. Well, first of all, let me just reiterate yet again that if you are a designer or an engineer working in the auto industry and you're listening to this, do not put the controls for your vents in the touchscreen. Just nice, simple mechanical controls. I want to just reach out and grab the little tab or the stick or whatever it is and adjust the airflow where I want it, please. And then another thing, something that annoys a lot of people, doesn't actually bother me. The Polestar 4 doesn't actually have a rear window.
Yes.
Because it's got this sloped tailgate. And, there's a lot of other cars that have a very similar kind of shape now. And what you inevitably end up with when you put a rear window in there, a little mail slot that you can barely see anything out of anyway. So Polestar decided, let's just get rid of the window because it's useless anyway. Just have a solid thing there. And then they have some of the electronics packed underneath there in the tailgate. And that works fine. And then they have a digital, camera-based mirror system.
Yeah. I
personally don't have an issue with it. Some people don't like that. I'm fine with that. And then the other thing on this particular car, because I've driven this car before, driven the Polestar before, on this particular one, the key fob was dead. And it comes with a key fob and an NFC card reader. And so with the key fob dead, you can't just, when you walk up to it, the door handles don't just pop out. And again, pop out door handles.
Another answer to a question nobody asked, just like the vents and the lack of a back window.
But if you want to open the tailgate, the button on the tailgate doesn't work either because it's not reading the fob. If the fob is either dead or you've perhaps left it at home and just gone out with your NFC card. So now you have to get in the car, start it, and then go, guess where? Into the touchscreen to press a button to open the tailgate. It's a shame because I really, really like driving this car.
Yeah. Do you think we're going to see a backlash to all of this technology, all of this connectivity, and OEMs going back to like traditional mechanical door handles and latches and stuff?
Absolutely, because and it's the reason why is China, because regulators in China in the last 6 months have imposed a bunch of new rules, basically saying, door handles, they have to be physical mechanical door handles. They, no pop outs, so that there's got to be something there that you can grab every time, even if the battery's dead, and still be able to open the door. And then also things like some of the basic controls, especially things like climate control, stuff that you use frequently, have to be physical controls. You can have it in the touchscreen too, but there has to be physical controls for that. And so the Chinese market is the biggest automotive market in the world. That's going to impact everybody else. Anybody that wants to sell in China is going to have to design their cars to those rules anyway. And so hopefully we will start to see some of these silly things. And
Yeah.
don't get me wrong, Polestar is by no means the only company to do this.
No.
Those touchscreen vents, guess who started that? Tesla.
Tesla, of
and
course.
then Rivian does it, Lincoln does it,
Yep.
Porsche does it on the Taycan. There's a whole bunch of vehicles, a bunch of Chinese are doing it. So, hopefully those new rules in China will change the industry globally.
Yeah, it's hilarious too because they're putting the air vent controls in the touchscreen, making them harder to access. But it's not simplifying everything because you need servo motors to control all the vents still. So you're adding complexity.
You're adding cost and making it more expensive to build. More things to potentially break. Mechanical vents, they almost never break.
No. And if they do, it's probably like $12 to fix it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So
Well,
keep it simple.
Exactly. I mean, there's a lot we could complain about there. We could go on for the next hour, but we're not here to gripe. We're here to learn. And our guest
Speak for yourself.
Right? Well, our guest today is Scott Case. He's the CEO of a company called Recurrent, and of course, we'll bring him on the show here in just a minute. But what are you hoping to learn from him today, Sam? I'd love to get his take on, whether EVs, used EVs, are a good buy, or if people should steer clear of those. But what are you hoping to learn?
Well, I'd like to learn a little bit more about what Recurrent does. I have personally used the service. I have it connected to our EV, our Kia EV6. But I want to know, and I'm not paying any money to Recurrent. What are they collecting? What and how are they using the data? And how are they running a business? And so that's one of the key things I'd like to learn from Scott.
Yeah, and also how they make money too, because they're not charging you for that. Yeah, for that data.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, we'll ask him all those questions and a lot more. But first, for help finding your next ride, visit GreenCars.com, where we have expert reviews, a helpful buyer's guide, there's an EV matchmaker, and much more. Again, that's GreenCars.com, your hub for sustainable motoring. But now I'd like to welcome Scott Case to the show. Scott, it's great to have you here.
It's really good to see you guys.
Yeah, so what got you interested in electric vehicles, and what EVs do you currently own?
What got me interested in this? My last company, we helped electric utilities with their energy efficiency programs, and I started to see towards the end of that time how much renewable energy was going to have to be integrated onto the grid, and how many batteries were going to be required to do that. And the company I actually wanted to start was not Recurrent, but I wanted to start a company that reused decommissioned EV batteries for grid storage. And in the process of looking at that company, it determined that it's way too early. There's just not enough. There are not enough EV batteries that are off, that are decommissioned to do that with. So, but I kind of got thinking about the used electric vehicle industry as a part of that process, and that became the opportunity I went after. We currently have two EVs. We have a 2023 Tesla Model Y. Like standard issue,
pretty
every
popular
single person
vehicle.
has one of those. It's like the Honda Civic of EVs. And then our other car is a little bit more exotic. We have a 2025 ID Buzz. We got the van.
Nice. Very nice. I love the ID Buzz. But just for viewers and listeners that aren't familiar, give us a basic rundown of what Recurrent is.
Yeah, sure. So Recurrent kind of does a couple of things. For most of your listeners, they're EV owners, right? Or potentially future EV owners. And what Recurrent is for individual drivers is like a battery monitoring app. So you come to Recurrent, you sign up your car, and then every month you get a bunch of insights on how your battery is, how your range is, how that compares to tens of thousands of other vehicles, and it's all free.
Nice.
So it's just a cool, it's a little like when you have your a combustion engine car, you go and get the oil change a couple times a year, and you get kind of, the mechanic looks at it, maybe they rotate the tires, they're like, everything looks good in there, and there's a great peace of mind for that. Well, you don't go and do that for an EV. And so a lot of people kind of wonder, is everything okay? And this is a way to take the data that's coming off of the car anyway, and basically give you peace of mind that, hey, everything looks normal on this, and occasionally we do find something where it's like, a specific vehicle, we see the range degrading really, really quickly. And we can actually alert people and say, ooh, that's something that's not normal. You might want to go bring that to the dealership. And we've actually detected defective batteries before, any indicator lights were on, just by looking at the data coming off of them and saying, hey, that doesn't look like all the other Audi e-trons, for instance, we've been tracking.
Yeah, we have a Kia EV6, and as soon as we got it, I signed up for Recurrent.
Yeah.
And, so you get the little dashboard that you can check, and you can see kind of what your state of charge is all the time on the vehicle, and then also one of the things you guys show is a little graph for that particular model of vehicle. Here's the typical range, and here's where you fall in terms of your range for that car. And it's nice to see that. It's a quick little indicator, but like you said, I can see how you would be able to provide some alerts to customers beforehand, so that they can get it checked out and see if there's a problem. Maybe there's a cooling problem with the battery or something with the electronics.
Yeah. Well, and then what I think is interesting too is when folks go to sell their EV, and then almost 99% of the time they're buying another EV. We have basically an ability for them to sell their car through us to a dealer that's also working with Recurrent, and it turns out that having a Recurrent data for your car over time is a little like saving all your paper service records in the glove compartment. Dealers are willing to pay more for your car when you're ready to sell, because they don't have a lot of risk associated with the battery, which is the thing that everybody's kind of concerned about the most. So that turns into you collect your data ahead of time, and then I guess if it's good, then you share it with the dealer, and you get a premium offer. So it works out really well, I think, for the EV owner.
So what about for buyers? How does this help buyers of EVs?
Yeah, so that's the other part of our business, is we work with car dealers all over the country, especially used EV specialists, right? And they actually use, so all the data, we've now observed over 1 billion miles of driving and charging data off of 50,000 or more individual vehicles. And that all gets aggregated together. And then when we work with a dealer or a marketplace, we then can give them analytics to share with potential shoppers, right? And so you can find Recurrent data. It just gets embedded right in the website. So you go to the listing page for the car, and you see all that kind of same stuff. How's the range for this car? How does that vary in different weather conditions that are appropriate to your area? How fast does it charge? A bunch of stuff under there. How much money am I going to save versus my gas car? All those kinds of deep analytics that matter really a lot to the EV shopper, that don't matter at all to the traditional ICE car shopper. So that's kind of the more of the data part of our business. That's where we actually make our money.
Gotcha. So if somebody's listening right now, they're thinking about getting a used EV. It's probably going to be maybe 3 years old, a lease turn-in or something. How concerned should they be about battery issues? Are you seeing a lot of problems in your data?
Very, very few. So that's the thing, is like a 3 to 5 year old EV at this point, they're typically on their second or third generation of battery technology. They're holding up way better than anybody, I think, was expecting, and maybe is expecting still. There's occasionally an issue, but there's also occasionally an issue with a combustion engine car. And for a 3-year-old EV, it's got, probably 5 years and 70,000 miles left on its battery warranty. So I don't think it should be a big concern. Now, if you take like a much older EV, especially like a first generation, the first version that any automaker put out there, and it's sort of getting closer to the end of its warranty, there may be some that's like a reason to have a higher level of concern, because it can be really expensive to do a fix if it's out of warranty. But what I do think is interesting for the 3-year-old car, which again, very, very unlikely to have a battery issue, is the range story. So EPA ranges are wrong. Wrong on day one, and they get wronger over time. Wronger is not a word, but they do.
Works perfectly, though.
And
I'll allow it.
yeah, there you go. It's descriptive. But it's not always wrong in one direction, right? So there are tons of automakers basically sandbagged their EPA range numbers. And so at the 3-year mark, they're getting better than their EPA range in real world driving. And we've got all that data, right? And so when one of those cars comes up for sale, when it's used on the dealer website, on the marketplace, we flag it as like, hey, it's exceeding its EPA in real world driving conditions. And then there are other cars that don't achieve their EPA, but like that data isn't out there at all, and so I think that's really something that's worth considering, as is, let's say 2 cars with 300 miles range. One of them gets 280 miles in the dead of winter in a cold environment, and the other one gets 160. That information also not out there at all. And so depending on where you live, there are some choices you should make for that used EV or new EV for that matter, that are just not obvious from the EPA, from a single EPA range number that's inaccurate.
So what data do you collect, and how do you go about getting that data from the vehicles? Do automakers provide you with APIs that you can access? How do you get the data?
Yeah, so basically every modern EV is streaming data to the manufacturer all the time over the air, right? I think of there's sort of a visual I have where just cars are driving along, just like spewing data out the back like they used to spew emissions, right? And that's that same data is used for every car has an iPhone app, right? Or a Android app that lets you start the car remotely or precondition the temperature, that sort of thing. And so there are API endpoints that basically are used for that. And we're able to, with the owner's permission, we're able to basically like allow the owner to collect data off of that same API endpoint. Sorry, you asked a second part of the question. What data it is?
Specific what kind of data do you get?
What data it is? You're like asking for a friend. You're like, wait, actually, what data are you collecting on my car?
Just your social security number and blood type.
Yeah,
no worries.
Very, very chill. So we get
all your private messages.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Just for you. We get the vehicle's odometer reading, sort of 3 to 5 times a day. The odometer reading, the vehicle's state of charge, how many electrons are in the tank right at that moment, the range estimate, how far does the car think it can go at that state of charge, and then if it's plugged in and charging, we get information about the charging event. So where it started, where it stopped, how much energy was added. That's it. We don't know where you are. We don't know how fast you're driving, any of those sort of personal, private things that are frankly creepy, and second of all, not necessary to do the analytics that we're doing. So we're just grabbing that small set of information, but grabbing it a lot of times and comparing it to a lot of other comparables. So that's how we can kind of do that math around range and battery analytics.
So I would assume the data is anonymous, and any driver's privacy would be very well protected then.
Yeah. And if you want to, like, anybody who's like, hey, I want to quit, I don't want this anymore, like, they can disconnect, we'll delete all their data, so it's, I think we've been very, very careful to make sure that this is not like I'm harvesting your data and selling it to third parties, kind of thing. It's your data. If you want to share it when you go to sell the car, great, you can do that, and that's kind of the end of the story.
So how do automakers feel about a company like Recurrent collecting some of this data and doing this analytics, especially if, in some cases, you said some manufacturers maybe sandbag and their numbers come out better than their EPA numbers, but we also know that there are those that do the opposite and regularly fall short. How do companies feel about you having this data and sharing it with the world?
So it's probably a mixed bag out there, but I think that is less to do with the overall impact to the automakers, which I think is positive, and more to do with just sort of, slow moving institutional, risk, or like risk, perception, basically, I'll put it that way. Basically across the board, the answer is always basically always better than what people expect on terms of like, how's the battery holding up? How's the range, right? And basically because people's expectation is, oh, this thing is going to nothing. It's going to wear down like my iPhone does. And so we've just seen again and again, when you put this information out there on the used market, the car sells better. It has a higher residual. It sells faster. Data causes confidence here. And I think that is something that, generally speaking, as the automakers are kind of coming around to that's something that they understand and are, supportive of what we're doing. One thing I will say is that automakers by and large care a lot less about used sales of their vehicles than they do new sales of their vehicles. And so this is a little bit of a, do I really care what's going on here? Little less, not as much. Some do. I mean, Tesla, Rivian sell their own vehicles, right? Obviously, all used is what I meant to say. All the other automakers have dealer networks which do sell their own used vehicles, and so there is a care factor there, and they care about what the residuals are in broadly. But it's a couple of orders, it's a couple of sort of like items down the priority list, and so I think that's probably why why automakers haven't jumped to do this themselves already.
Well, I would guess that since manufacturers have used leasing a lot to, especially subsidized leasing deals, to promote EVs and get lower monthly prices out there for consumers over the last several years, that they would actually appreciate something like this that could help elevate those residual values, because it actually benefits them financially. Because even if they're not directly selling those vehicles at the end of the lease to consumers like Tesla or Rivian, they still have to send those vehicles to auction, and they're not recovering as much if those resale values are lower than what they had in the lease deal.
Well, so that brings up an interesting kind of issue there, right? Where it's actually less the manufacturer that cares about that and more the finance company that is can be attached to the manufacturer. So it's not Hyundai, it's Hyundai Motor Finance, right? Or Hyundai Motor Capital. It's not in other cases, it's a bank that owns the lease, right? So a lot of Tesla leases are held by banks like Chase and Ally and Bank of America and that sort of thing. So those are the organizations that are on the hook for at the end of the lease, they've got to resell it basically, and so there is a huge care factor there, I think, around, gosh, I don't want to lose my shirt when I go and take this lease in. They have to do something really awkward, which is like make a promise that here's what the car is going to be worth 3 years from now. And there's a ton of volatility in that. And so what they really want is to make sure that they can maximize and get as much as possible and not lose their shirt on the resale value. So it's a little more complicated than, the automakers care about that. It's the finance arms that really care about that.
So then with all of that data, then if you had to recommend an EV, either new or used, based on what you have.
Now I got to pick favorites.
Notice if there are any outstanding models that you see in the data you mentioned earlier. A lot of them, or at least some of them, will over deliver, will provide more range than the EPA estimate. Are there any that jump to mind that you could recommend?
I mean, here's one thing that I would say to anybody who's thinking about a 3-year-old, buying a 3-year-old EV. First of all, they're all going to be in great shape from a battery perspective, right? That's like, answer number one, and I wouldn't worry too much about that at all. Second thing is, I would say it kind of depends on what you're looking for, right? Like what's really important to you. Is maximum range, really important to you? Then I would look at, there are a whole bunch of options out there that exceed the original EPA range, right? And it tends to be, I'll say, like the Hyundais and Kias in particular hold up really well, and hold up really well and deliver better. Yes, it's like deliver better than their EPA range after 3 years. But as do a whole bunch of other cars. Tesla's not so much. I mean, that's pretty well documented that, Tesla's at 3-year mark to delivering, 90% of their EPA range. But that doesn't mean that their batteries have worn down. It just means that they were more aggressive on their EPA range sort of estimates at the beginning. And that gap has been closing, by the way. With the more recent model years, we're seeing less and less of a gap. So I think that they're dialing it in a little bit more and being a little bit more conservative on their EPA range testing. So that's one, right? Is like, if long range is important to you, and that's the number one thing, I'd look at sort of, well, I was going to say I'd look at anything but a Tesla, but that's actually not accurate because like you have to compare the real world range of the two, right? So a Tesla with an original EPA range of 320 is maybe getting 280 now, 3 years later. That you need to compare that to the real world range of the EV6, and that may be comparable. Just because then the range when new of the Kia was lower basically than the Tesla, but it's held up better. The second thing I look at is like, let's say you're thinking about, gosh, what's really important to me, because I don't have a place that I can charge at home, is I want a lightning fast charging experience, right? Fast charging experience. And that's also something, just sidebar for a minute, like the only charging speed metrics that are out there are 20 to 80% in this amount of time. And that's the dumbest metric ever for a couple of reasons. One is that's not typically how people do it, right? Like you go on a road trip and you go in and you stop to go to the bathroom for 5 minutes and you jam a bunch of electrons in the tank and then you keep going, right? And you're typically at sort of a lower state of charge. Maybe you're down to 15%, you jam it up to 50%. That's enough to get to your destination. So that's one reason. The other reason is a car with a really big battery, it just takes longer to go from 20 to 80%, right? And so it's not to say, oh, this car has a 40-minute charge time from 20 to 80 versus this other car with a tiny battery has a 20-minute charge time from 20 to 80. It's not that second car is faster charging, So the metric we use is time to add 100 miles of range on a fast charger. And so there, and that's like, again, the cars that excel on that are not the obvious ones, and I guess the other thing is like more efficient cars, like, the electrons you can jam in there in 5 minutes take the car further, right? So I can't, Sam, I don't know. I mean, you're a professional, like the Kia EV6 is one of the fastest, fast charging cars to add 100 miles of range. Like you're getting 100 miles in 6 to 7 minutes at a fast charger, versus other cars. I think the average for the 2023 model year is about 18 minutes to add 100 miles. So you're 3x that average. So again, if that's the really, really important thing, that's the one you should, that's probably one of the ones you should be looking at. Buy Sam's old car, basically.
But
we're not selling it, but I actually just recently did a road trip with a bunch of EVs. We were moving some rescue dogs from the Midwest to the Pacific Northwest, and we had four EVs. And
four different cars.
Yeah, we had a Cadillac Escalade IQ, a Kia EV9, a Hyundai Ioniq 9, and a Lucid Gravity. They all have we have basically three very different charging characteristics. The Cadillac has an enormous battery and will charge at over 350 kilowatts up until it gets to about 30-ish, 35% state of charge, and then starts tapering off. Meanwhile, the EV9, it jumps up to, and the same for the Ioniq 9, they jump up to 235, 240 kilowatts, and then they just stay there for, I was charging the EV9 one day, and at 57% state of charge, it was still going 237 kilowatts. And, it'll stay, close to 200, even right up to about 80%. So, yeah, you're right. There's very different characteristics for all these vehicles, and the way you measure it makes a difference.
Yeah. And just for anybody who's just listening to that, like great explanation of charging curves, like that's exactly right, but it's also incredibly nerdy and very difficult to figure out. So that's why we boiled this down into like, how long does it take to add 100 miles in the car? Like that, I think, is the perfect, metric for fast charging. But that said, like, 90%, 95% of charging happens at home just overnight. You get home, you plug it in, and when you get up in the morning, it's done, right? So I think like I wouldn't over rotate on that sort of time to add 100 miles unless you don't have a garage or a driveway or something to plug in at home, in which case, like, yeah, that could be pretty important.
So Scott, just for a little clarification, and I think you mentioned this earlier, that time to add 100 miles, that's an average, right? Because it might be drastically different if you're at 20% state of charge versus, 80%, which is typically where the curves
So what we
go
do,
down.
rather than sort of having and showing the charge curve, and we thought about all of that in the user experience, we just said, we're going to grab an average of the average rate from, I think it's like 15% state of charge up to 70 or whatever, and like, what's the average of that, the average sort of speed at which the electrons go into the battery, and then what's that car's efficiency of using those electrons to move forward, basically. And so that's the derived metric that just makes it easier than nerding out on the charging curve differences.
And that's a lot more math than I can manage. Maybe Sam, you're an engineer, you can figure that out, but.
Yeah, Sam loves the charge curve. You're not taking charge curve out of his cold dead hands. But for a lot of normal people, how long is it? You stop for 5 minutes, you use the bathroom, and you're ready to go.
Until we have a bucket of electrons you can just pour in, then.
They have some of those. There's mobile chargers out there that companies are starting to use for roadside service. So we're getting there.
Oh, it's funny. But I love that expression, a bucket of electrons. Maybe we should start referring to gasoline as buckets of electrons.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier that one of the things you don't collect is location data. But do you ever get some data like from some sources on where charging's being done, or for example, do you know if it's being done on a level 2 charger or a DC fast charger, and being able to correlate that, and also maybe weather data. If you know where a vehicle is, then you can perhaps come up with some insights based on how does the vehicle perform in winter weather versus summer weather.
Yeah. So actually, I should say, I left out or neglected to sort of say that one of the signals we get from the car is what's the external temperature. So that's as well. So that's a piece of information we get as well. We don't get that on every car, but we do ask people when they sign up what your zip code is, and basically like we use that to correlate with the weather data. And you're not always going to be right around your house, but that's I think is a reasonable proxy when we don't get external temperature data from the car.
So DC fast charging is a lot more stressful to batteries than level 2 AC charging that you would typically do at home. Do you have any insights into the battery life degradation that might occur with DC fast charging versus level 2 charging?
So a little bit, I would say DC fast charging's impact on battery degradation is, as far as we can tell, minimal when just used sparingly. So most people, they do, most of their charging on level 2 at home or, plugged in at work or something like that, and then occasionally fast charge. Like, no reason to be worried about that. There's certainly lab evidence and anecdotal, I'd say there is some data evidence that says, like, if all you do is force feed a car DC fast charging, that you will lose, battery degradation and range a little bit more quickly, but to the tune of a couple of percentage points over the first few years, kind of thing. That's what we've seen. And Sam, earlier you asked, can we tell when a car is plugged into connected to Recurrent? Can we tell what kind of charging events they are? And yes, the answer is yes, because we're getting the start and stop charge levels and how much energy was added. And so we can just basically like, oh gosh, if you went from 15 to 80% in 15 minutes, that was obviously a fast charging event, not a level 2 charging event. So we just look at the rate of energy being added, and then we can distinguish, is it is a fast charge, is it a level 2, is it somebody just plugged it into their extension cord in their garage, level 1 charge. So yeah, we can figure that out.
Okay.
So how many users does Recurrent have? Is it US only? And if somebody wants to sign up, how do they do that?
We have 35,000 folks
Nice.
tracking their cars at this point.
Wow.
It is US only, unfortunately, although we have a suspicious number of people that live right along the Canadian border in small towns, just right along the border.
Isn't that
I think
convenient?
How that works.
there are some Canadians in there that fake their zip code in order to participate. Yeah, so, and then to sign up, come to recurrentauto.com, and there's a owner's tab, and you can just sort of sign up and get started with your with tracking your car.
Nice. And then how does that communicate with the vehicle itself? You sign up online. How do you get that connected to the car?
Yeah, so when you go in and do the create your Recurrent account, you enter your VIN or your license plate, and then we do a little lookup to say, okay, well, which manufacturer is that associated with, right? If it's a Tesla, then you get redirected to basically sign in and authenticate with Tesla to basically give us permission to, give Recurrent permission to track that data. And then you can see it actually in your car on the dashboard. If you kind of go into the, third-party apps, and you can also see it on your phone, like third-party app authorized Recurrent. So, and then you can actually revoke it from there as well if you want. So, so that's, but and then if it's a different make and model of car, then we redirect to that manufacturer's authentication, sort of third-party authentication system.
Gotcha.
Yeah, when we got ours, when I signed up for Recurrent, I put in the VIN number for the EV6, and then it redirected to the Kia Access to log in through the Kia Access account, and that gave it the information.
Yeah, and I will say one limitation, I think it's less of a limitation moving, as we go forward, is you do have to have the at least the base level kind of connected services plan for the manufacturer in order to share data, right? And so the reason I say it's a limitation is that some manufacturers say, well, you get to have that connected services for 3 years, and then after that you have to pay for it. And, I think if the customer is not doing anything else besides using Recurrent, it's tough to say, I want to pay $10 a month to just keep on, basically track my data. Some people do, but I think ideally you'd want to get some other benefit out of that connected services plan. But I'm hopeful that over time, Tesla makes it free, at least the base level connectivity, which is all we need. It makes it free for forever. And I think more and more manufacturers are at least giving you the base level connected services for the life of the car. And then if you want to sign up for premium XM radio or premium traffic or whatever, then they're charging a little bit for that. I think that's probably the way things end up. But there are situations where, like an older car, that either you don't want to pay for it, or some of the really older cars still have 2G or 3G modems in there, and so we can't get data out of them at all. If you go way back, but that's not very many at this point.
You need a phone line to plug in the modem at that point.
It's a 400 baud modem,
right?
Riding around the car. Yeah.
Just a big spool of wire behind you. But
yeah,
Scott Case, fascinating discussion. Before we let you go, though, we've got to do our 3 for the road segment. So this is a quick tip or trick we share for drivers to help them go green. And given the nature of what you do, I thought it was interesting. Maybe we could cover some tips that EV drivers can do to maximize the life of their vehicle's battery packs, aside from signing up from Recurrent, of course.
So I want you guys have to participate in this as well, right?
Oh, yes. Absolutely.
All right. So I want you guys to go first, and then I'll back clean up.
Oh, okay. Sam, take it.
All right. So, pretty much every EV on the road has settings that you can go in, and you can do things like manage your charging, what time of day you want to charge, what the maximum charge rate you want to do, what state of charge you want it to go to, where do you want it to stop. So, if you have an EV and you haven't gone in and checked out those settings and adjusted that, so that you're only charging when your utility is at the cheapest rates, or to not charge to 100% all the time. Go in, make some adjustments in those settings, so that you can get the most out of your EV, so it's available when you need it, and you're saving the most money in terms of your operating costs.
A great
That's
suggestion.
solid.
Yeah. Mine it's something we just touched on a couple minutes ago. It's, minimize the DC fast charging if you can. Electric vehicles, it's not a problem to DC fast charge. Use it when you need it. But ideally, don't do that every day. So, save that for the road trips, right?
That's fair.
I mean,
that's fair.
but-
and plus, it costs a lot of money
Yeah.
to do that compared to just charging at home. But not everybody has that option, so I think that's a reasonable thing.
Exactly. And to your point, though, it sounds like the degradation from DC fast charging is perhaps not as much as people initially thought. So.
That's right. I think but there's a lot. We could do a whole another episode on the electrochemical kind of reactions going on inside. It's a complex subject. But it's like the big takeaway is like, it's okay, but if you have to do it all the time, it's going to, cost you a lot and probably, wear down your battery a little faster.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So you guys took some good ones. I'm going to go with one that's going to be a little bit impractical, and that is don't live in Phoenix.
Okay.
I mean, that's not a bad suggestion just in general.
Right.
Or if you do live in Phoenix, you should, ideally, really, it's a good idea to try and park your car in the shade, park your car in a somewhat conditioned, temperature conditioned garage. And basically that's just because the extreme heat is the enemy of batteries over time, lithium-ion batteries over time. Do you guys, I don't know, did you grow up storing your Duracell batteries in the freezer, when you got them before you use them? Does that ring any bells?
No,
it does.
Not for me.
I never actually did it, but
But you sort of have that in that mental model.
Yeah.
Well, so there is that. I don't know whether that actually worked or not, or if that was just sort of folk legend. But the truth behind that is that extreme cold, so literally parking your car in the freezer, if you could do that, is while it would limit it, extreme cold makes individual trips you don't go as far, right? But it is totally fine for the life of the battery over time. However, extreme heat, we have seen in our data, does reduce does increase battery degradation by a little bit, right? And so the ways to mitigate that, I'm not literally suggesting that people who live in Phoenix should leave Phoenix.
Sam was, though.
Oh,
I think it's not.
But parking in the shade, parking in a garage where there's, it's not going to 130 degrees in there. Making sure that when you go on, if you leave for a week or two, that you're leaving it plugged in kind of at the, so that it doesn't drain its battery, trying to, in a valiant effort to keep the battery temperature condition, because that it will use its own electricity in the battery to keep the battery at a reasonable temperature, at a safe temperature. And so over time, if you left the car sitting in the open at the Phoenix airport, for instance, for 2 weeks at a time, not plugged in, you would just see the battery level would just go down much faster than it would in the if you did the same thing in the winter, because the car is just it's using its energy in the battery to protect itself, basically. And once it runs out, a week into that vacation, then there's no way it cannot protect it anymore, and then the battery's just baking all day, and that is really, really not good for it.
That sounds really bad.
Yeah, back in the early days of the Nissan Leaf in 2010, 11, 12.
The poor Leafs.
I remember reading about a lot of Leaf owners, because that one had an air-cooled battery. So pretty much all modern EVs have liquid-cooled batteries, but those Leafs had air-cooled batteries. And in the Southwest, a lot of people did have problems with the batteries just degrading and losing capacity within a couple of years. And it was obviously due to the heat.
Yeah. And so now all the liquid-cooled batteries, they're fine as long as they have energy to run their cooling system. So the real problem is if you're overwhelming that because there's no energy to run the cooling system, or if you are just exposed to extreme heat over time. We do see there's just some incremental, again, couple of points here or there, off the battery based on just kind of existing in Phoenix.
Yeah. Well, if you can avoid it, park in the shade, avoid the heat, go in a garage, something like that. And that's a great tip. It's
Generally good advice anyway.
I mean,
It's not bad.
Yeah.
It's not bad. Yeah, you don't want to bake the seats and stuff like
No.
that, and so yeah.
definitely not. But not something I considered. And to maximize your EV's battery life, avoid that heat. But Scott Case, CEO of Recurrent, great discussion. This was a lot of fun. Thank you again for joining us.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
Good
Scott.
to be here.
So, the biggest takeaway here, I think it is just don't live in Phoenix, right? That's an absolutely hilarious response to that question. I love it.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, he was using Phoenix as an example, but
Yeah.
in general, if you live in a hot weather environment, heat is the thing that is most likely to damage a battery. If you understand the chemistry of it, and that's also one of the things. I mean, we talked about DC fast charging and the potential it has for damaging the battery. And really, it's not so much that you're putting a lot of energy into the battery quickly. It's that when you do that, the battery heats up. And so the key is managing the temperature of the battery, both from the charger side, but also from the vehicle side. And so, what Scott said about if you have an EV and you live in an environment like Phoenix or Las Vegas or some other desert environment where it gets very hot, try to park it in the shade or park it in a garage if you can. Keep it plugged in if you're going to not be using it for a while. If you're going away on a trip and it's going to be sitting idle, leave it plugged in. But maybe what you should consider doing is reducing the max state of charge in the battery. So typically, it's recommended that you charge it for just daily driving, only charge to 80 or 90%. Maybe for, if you're going to be away for a week or 2 weeks, whatever, maybe just change that to like 50 or 60%. So you're not overcharged. But by leaving it plugged in, you're not going to have that problem of, the battery trying to manage its temperature when it's hot and then just running the battery down to zero. So it'll at least be able to keep the battery charged and at the same time keep it cool enough to avoid permanent damage to the battery.
It was also interesting as well that he explained, I always knew that cold temperatures, obviously those affect the range of an EV, but I did not know, I just assumed cold temperatures also sort of damage the battery, but that's not the case like it is with the heat. So that's good to know.
Yes. Yeah. So with cold temperatures, it's not so much even that the cold temperatures in and of themselves have an impact on the range. It's the other things you have to do when it gets very cold, like putting on your heater. And if you're in snow, you get more rolling resistance. Those are the things that cut the range. What cold does to a battery is it limits its power output. So if a battery is capable of putting out, let's say, 150 kilowatts nominally, it might be, when it's really cold, it might only put out 100 or 80 or 90 kilowatts. So you're not going to have as much performance, but it's also not going to be able to absorb energy as fast when you charge it. So one of the things that we're increasingly seeing on new vehicles is battery heaters that will warm up the battery before when you're getting ready to plug it in. Because when the battery is very cold, it won't charge. The power, it just has more resistance. The power doesn't flow in or out as fast.
Yeah, definitely. I was also delighted to learn that EVs, and this is something we kind of already knew, but EVs are lasting a lot longer than expected.
Yeah, and that's I think a key thing, especially now as more and more people are considering buying used EVs. We're at the stage now in the history of the EV where we're getting more of the first and second generation EVs getting into the used car market. EVs are still comparatively new, from a historical perspective, and we're getting more and more of those EVs that were purchased new in the last 5-6 years that are now making their way into the used car market, and especially this year. We had a lot of EVs that were leased over the last couple of years to take advantage of the now expired tax credits. Those are starting to come into the used car market. And so people are thinking about, okay, I've been wanting to get an EV or thinking about getting an EV. Now there's something that is within my price range And that's exactly what my wife and I did last year. When we bought an EV, we bought a 2-year-old EV and got a fantastic deal on it. But the thing that people get concerned about is, okay, if they're used to having their mobile devices, having their phones and their laptops, that after 2 or 3 years, battery just doesn't last as long. And they're concerned that the same thing is going to happen if they buy an EV. Am I going to buy a 3-year-old EV and then have to spend $10,000-$15,000 to replace the battery in 6 months? Well, that's just not the case. Now we know we have the data to show that EVs, the EV batteries will last pretty much almost as long as an internal combustion engine will. And the cost, the replacement cost is, certainly for most people, if the vehicle is less than 10 years old, they wouldn't even have to pay anything to replace it because that's the warranty on most EV batteries. But then beyond that, the cost is going to actually probably be pretty similar to doing an engine rebuild or a replacement on a combustion vehicle.
Because that ain't cheap either. Your
no,
downsized
definitely not.
turbocharged engine craps out or
very
something.
Complex.
Yeah, you're going to have
a friend of mine had a Volvo XC90 a couple of years ago, had a catastrophic engine failure that was going to cost something like $14,000 or $15,000 to replace the engine, and the insurance company ended up just writing it off, and just paying for the car and totaling it.
Yeah, and that's, $15,000 isn't cheap, but imagine if you had a Mercedes AMG or something, or a BMW M car with some high performance, highly tuned engine. That's gonna,
Yes.
Get your checkbook out, folks. And lastly, what else did we learn? We learned a little bit about how Recurrent works with dealerships. It's a great service for customers that they're able to see the life of the battery in the EV that they might be considering purchasing, right?
Yeah. You can get a lot of, you can sign up if you already have an EV, you can sign up and get the data on your vehicle and have a dashboard that you can check in with regularly and see how your EV is doing. But also, if you are considering buying a used EV, you can go to dealers that they partner with and get not just general historical data on that model, but specific data from that particular vehicle that you might be considering purchasing. And that's something that you rarely ever get, is that kind of level of specific detail on a car that you're purchasing, unless somebody has kept really meticulous service records and every time they put gas in the car, how much gas they put in, what was the mileage and everything. So getting that kind of data, can give you a lot more confidence when you're buying an EV. And that's of course, how Recurrent is making their money, is working with the dealers. They, when they sell an EV that's using their data, I think they get a little cut of that transaction, and that pays for the service that they're providing.
Maybe we can get in on that and get our own cut of the money. Figure out how to develop an app for something. Sam Abuelsamid, VP of Market Research at Telemetry. Great talking to you. As always, this show was a lot of fun, and I'll see you in the next one.
Yeah, I'll see you soon, Craig.
And with that, thank you all so much for watching GreenCars, the podcast, right here on YouTube. Also, the audio version of this show is available from all of your favorite podcast providers, so make sure you check that out. But up next, click the link on screen. Could be over here or the other side, maybe above me even, wherever our producer Ben puts that. Click the link to check out another fantastic GreenCars video. You won't be disappointed. It could be another episode of this show, maybe a vehicle review. I don't know. Click the link, watch it, and make sure you keep it clean and go green.